right, it's another film study. This time it's the offense. Still looking at week 4 as we headed down to play the Washington football team. Ken McKusick, how you doing?
Life's good, Josh. How about you?
I'm doing great. Join us this week. We'll get right into it. Is Alec Pulianas from Ravens Recap. Alec, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Super excited to join you this time for this season after a long off season of anticipating it.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, Alec. And of course, we did a lot of shorts over the off season, a lot of preview of various positional groups and some other stuff too. I've been on your show at least once or twice now, right?
Yep.
And really appreciate doing that, and always like having you on.
Oh, it's a thrill. Let's get into it.
All right. Well, before we get into that, I wanted to ask you guys kind of a softball going into this. Is we know coming out there was lots of disappointment. And is that because we, as fans, were expecting too much as a bounce-back game against the Chiefs going into this game?
I mean, I'll start. I think so. But if you're upset about a 2-touchdown win, particularly one that's a 3-touchdown win, drained down to a 2-touchdown win, I don't know how to make you happy.
Ken, you said it great. People were losing their minds after the Chiefs game. They forget that they just won the Super Bowl. They're extremely good. I don't understand it. Like, they're a good team. What do you expect? Obviously, there's plenty of room to improve, but this is great. Like, the best outcome for the Ravens was to lose that game or win in a total landslide, right? Because then you have the opportunity to learn. You're going to see them again. You're trying to earn the privilege of seeing them again. And in a COVID year, yes, you lost the 1.5 game, but you're not worried about home field as much. You're not worried about some of those things. So, I don't know. People just losing their mind. For this game, like you said, 2 touchdowns. Could have been more if I think we tried harder, honestly. I think we had injuries on our side, particularly, on offense that changed the game plan. I was fine with it. You're playing a middling team that's trying to find themselves.
You're being very sensitive to the Washington football team to call them a middling team.
So, I honestly think that if they had a quarterback, right, and they would be a draft or 2 away from maybe being a playoff team. I honestly think that. Maybe I'm way off base.
It's okay. It's just you've put so many conditions upon that. It's like the old joke about a baseball team. We're only 2 players away from a world championship here: Babe Ruth and Sandy Koufax.
No, you're right. I ask a lot. Finding a quarterback's hard.
You put Mahomes on any team in the NFL, and they're a draft or 2 pick away.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Definitely.
But even I don't know. Honestly, Teddy Bridgewater. I think if you put Teddy Bridgewater on that team with the weapons they have, it could be much more interesting than Dwayne Haskins.
Okay. They've got a bad quarterback. We agree with that. Peter King came out with kind of what I thought was kind of a silly tweet after the game. He said the Ravens are 0-6. It's not that anything is wrong about this, but they're 0-6 in games where they trail at halftime. And then he went into the thing. There's a lot of the blame is easy to spread around, or words to that effect. There's a lot of places where blame is. And I'm like, really? 0-6. First of all, sample size. Think. Okay. Second of all, that's all the losses under Lamar. So when tied or leading after halftime, because there's been several ties, they are 22-0 with Lamar Jackson. I mean, really, just take a look both ways. And there's games there that they've trailed after halftime, after being either tied or leading at halftime.
Right.
One of the things just kind of makes me upset. Okay,
let's jump on. Let's jump into Sunday's game and the Washington football team.
The Washington football team. We'll just do that. You definitely have a specific accent there. I noticed in the last show the Washington thing again.
That's a Baltimore accent.
Is it really? Okay.
Yes.
I grew up here. And
okay, then I don't know why you don't say Washington.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I don't.
It's very specific to the team that we cover in the city.
Okay. So all right. I probably ought to be careful about that then. Let's talk offensive line play. We'll start there. This is a game where it seemed like the offensive line play was better for a couple of reasons. One is they only allowed 1 sack. The Ravens did in the game. And that 1 sack wasn't charged to the offensive line. It came on a free runner. Actually, it came on a situation where Lamar rolled out of the pocket on a naked boot. And that you wouldn't think that the grades could be that bad. But they had a season high 30 yards of penalties that contributed to it. They allowed 5 pressures, which is a little bit more than they had been allowing. They had 31 missed blocks in what's a relatively short amount of game, and those are the major contributors to creating some lower grades this time. So I level set you on what's going on here. Overall, the Ravens gave Jackson and Griffin ample time on space of just 6 of 24 throws, 6 of 23 for Jackson. That's low by today's standards at 25%. Today's standard is more like 35%. So not a good opportunity set for those quarterbacks. I think they did a much better job in terms of run blocking.
Yeah, the run blocking this year has been the highlight, in my opinion. It's been the pass blocking where we've seen some up and down play. And I think, though, the way that they transitioned, just kind of jumping to flipping the tackles, right? Orlando Brown Jr. flipping, and then Fluker coming in on the right side. I was pretty impressed overall with how well they gelled. I don't know how often they've practiced in that formation this week, but it was pretty impressive.
That must be how they did it. Once they knew Stanley was out, they had to have somebody playing left tackle. And it was a surprising non-activation of Will Holden. They had him protected either for 1 or 2 of the 4 weeks already. And they didn't activate him even though they could have without any kind of consequences to it, because it would have been only the first activation of it. So it's very surprising from that perspective. And it really begs the question is, what the hell were they going to do if either Fluker or Brown had gotten hurt? So who was next up at tackle? And it was an interesting move, and they really were playing without a net in that regard. They also played without a net at safety. They entered a game with only 3 guys that they were willing to play at safety, and one of them got hurt on the very first series, and that meant they had to put Board in as a emergency safety on the first series of the game, which obviously shouldn't happen. And then when you think about that, one of their 2 remaining safeties is also their only reserve cornerback of any real note, and that's Jimmy Smith. They ended up putting in Khalil Dorsey. So odd set of activations for this game, I'm going to say.
I am pretty shocked that Nigel Warrior and Geno Stone have not been activated in one way or another. It makes no sense to me. Yeah, I agree.
Warriors protected this week. Stone is obviously on the roster and available, and back-end safety is what he could do. So if you want a guy who you think you can trust for 35% of the snaps, which would be the approximate amount of dime they would play, then it seems like Ward would be the guy, unless Warrior's the guy in practice who you think looks better. Both of them are there. Both of them are practicing. There's a pretty good chance they have a guy they like from those 2, and that guy should probably be active at this point. Anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
We were talking about the offensive line, weren't we? How did you take us down this path anyway, Alec? What kind of guest are you?
You talked about Will. That's what happened.
All right.
They didn't bring up Will Holden. I don't know. I think they just don't like him. I honestly think that they'd have him around as an insurance policy they'd never wish to cash.
Yeah.
And I honestly think they'd rather go with like McCary or something on the outside, which I think would be scary. But
very.
I honestly don't know what they're doing in that regard.
It is really scary because the Will Holden's been released 8 times by 7 teams now. So the Ravens are his 7th organization. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they've released him now. They've one of the teams that have released him too. So there's 7th team in a 4-year career. So there's nothing exciting about what he ever did at left tackle, but it would allow the Ravens to make that 1-for-1 change that they typically like to do. I thought Brown did a terrific job filling in. Not everything is right up his alley in terms of what he can do, but he didn't allow any pressures in 24 snaps, and that's really terrific. That'd be great for Stanley, not just for Brown. A little bit of a shorter game, still exceptional. What he did allow is he allowed 2 penetrations. Those are times when he allowed a play to be made on the backfield on his watch on a run play for a loss. So he had 2 of those. He also had a false start in the game, as I'm sure everybody saw. And otherwise, a very clean game. Those are some deductions there. He had 5 missed blocks. Works out to a B- after a fairly significant adjustment. I always felt like I was chintzy on the adjustment because I give him 1 more point, he gets a B. But on the other hand, I gave him a pretty beefy adjustment as it was. Obviously playing out of position. There's some good things to like about him, but that's where I felt his grade really belonged.
So I want to ask you about something I see in your notes that you said he lacks the quickness to make steal blocks off the left edge.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest things that came to mind after this performance was, well, I think his price tag just went up because now there's film of him playing left tackle in the NFL pretty well, right? And we've always talked about how they're going to retain all these players. They can't. And I was wondering, is he someone that they're worried about, or is the Stanley negotiations going poorly enough that they're legitimately considering this option?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's really even a possibility. Let's start with, I really don't think they can lose Stanley. I think they need to keep him. I think he's too central to the long-term success of Lamar to really have him be not on the team. But I understand they're a long way away, and it could legitimately be a chance where they have to draft another left tackle. I think that would be the next likely choice of circumstances. I think Brown ending up on the left side is actually quite unlikely. One thing you notice here, and that is a big difference in terms of working with Lamar, is Brown just does not have the quickness to get out on the edge and seal that player, seal that defender, whether it's at level 1 or at level 2 again. He does not have the quickness to do it, and one of the 2 penetrations was really an instance of that, where the guy got outside and took Lamar down. Anyway, this should underscore the need for Stanley as much as it's a wonderful relief to see Brown play well for this one game.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
All right, let's move on. Bozeman hadn't had a bad game in a long time, and he hadn't had a C in about, 12, 13 games, something like that. Now he had a D, and you have to go back even further, obviously, for that. I believe he had one more. It was about in might have been week 10 of last year. He had a D. I have to look at my chart, but I'm not going to do that right now. Anyway, 9 missed blocks in this game, which is a lot. That's obviously one of the big problems. He did surrender a quarterback hit, and he had a pressure. And since he left the game early in particular, he was just 31 of 47 in terms of points earned. Even with a fairly significant adjustment, and he played on the inside where he got a lot of Allen and Settle, on those snaps. I can't give him a huge adjustment for that. So .71 is the after adjustment score. He got a D. 4 level 2 blocks, 5 of 5 on pulls. Very nice to see him score well in terms of mobility blocks. I thought he did well in those terms. He also had 2 highlight blocks. I believe both of them were combinations. Have to look at that again. But did some good things. It's not like he didn't do anything well. It just wasn't overall a well-scoring game for Bozeman. It's his first in a long time.
Yeah, that's right. And you saw that he got some credit on the telecast when he was one of the key blocks to spring Lamar for his 50-yard run. But overall, like you said, he did have some struggles building off of last week's struggles. I do anticipate he'll come back. I'm not concerned about him at this point, but yep, that's the trend right now.
Yeah, the run right for 50. So he pulled, and he did not overcommit to the level 2 block, and he stayed with it for a good long time, long past the point where Lamar was gone. I really like to see that out of any lineman, but in particular guards who can tend to get lungy in level 2. They don't use their size and positioning well enough, as opposed to trying to go to the legs and cut block the guy, or just give him a real hard push that can also be ineffective as well. Just generally speaking, maintaining good position is usually more valuable, and a non-lungy guard like that, non-lungy move is worth noting. All right, let's move on. Matt Skura has now played 3 consecutive pretty darn good games here. So he's after a F in week 1. He's had, I believe, an A and 2 Bs. Might have been an A minus and 2 Bs, but we don't need to look at that with that kind of granularity. He had no negative events other than the false start penalty, which happened fairly late in the game. Connected on 1 of 2 pulls, 3 blocks in level 2. And his score, oddly enough, worked out to be exactly identical to last week, which is a .84 base with the same adjustment. So B again in this game for Skura.
Now, in your adjustments, when you do a false start and you're the guy responsible for snapping the ball, is that worse? I'm asking legitimately if that's worse than your scoring.
I don't make any distinction because I don't think there is any reason why it would be worse. And one thing we could talk about briefly is that a false start penalty relative to other 5-yard post snap penalties is actually less significant. And the idea, I mean, I think we may have had this discussion before, but if you have a false start penalty, it's 5 yards. If you have a illegal man downfield penalty, which is also a 5-yard penalty, it's 5 yards unless the defense likes the result of the play better. So it's the optionality of that penalty is not really fully captured in my system. I still charge them as the same deduction for a 5, 10, or 15-yard penalty in per yard on a per yard basis. And what I've been thinking about doing for several years is changing a 5-yard pre-snap penalty to -2, and then if there's optionality on the penalty, have an additional 2-point deduction. So a holding penalty would still be the same, but a false start penalty would be reduced in importance slightly. So anyway,
yeah,
just my thinking. All right, let's move on here. We have Phillips had his best game of the year last week against the Chiefs. Took a big step backward this week. 2.5 pressures, a quarterback hit, 6 missed blocks. Scored a D in this game. It was kind of towards the low end of the range as well. Didn't pull effectively. In fact, one of the pressures he allowed was on a pull, an odd P-2 on a pull block for a pressure. Pulling on a pass play is rare enough, but to also give up a pressure on that play is a little odd. So anyway, D for him. I don't have a lot to say other than his mobility numbers are again down. 2 out of 5 on pulling obviously is bad, but he also only made 1 level 2 block. There were opportunities in this game to get into level 2 and make some blocks. He just didn't convert any of them, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, his preseason's now over, so
Yeah.
I heard Justin Jefferson for the Vikings was talking about, I'm now done my preseason, and now he started turning it on the last 2 games. Obviously, it seems like Fluker has had kind of 2 games this year where we've kind of been like, what's going on with this guy? But he's a rookie, and he seems to have a lot of talent. I hope he has a bounce back game next week against the Bengals.
Yeah, I hope so too, because we saw something at right tackle, and I think you said Fluker there. You really meant Phillips, but I want to get on to no, it's fine.
Yeah.
I want to get on to Fluker anyway, and just make clear that Fluker was having a fantastic game prior to about the last 10 minutes when he had 2 holding penalties. The 2 holding penalties are pretty serious deductions. They lowered his grade to a D for the game. Without those 2, he'd had an A. So it's a big difference in terms of what happened there. I look at this game from Fluker and say, I'm not really that concerned about the grade, obviously, because in part, those holding penalties came in garbage time. I'm more interested about what I saw qualitatively from him as a blocker in this case. And what I saw was some amazing ability for a guard to pivot the defender who he's trying to seal. And so we saw him on the right edge a couple of times, pivot a guy. And, Yanda was a brilliant at this, to be able to pivot the guy right through and open the front gate for a right-handed running game. Well, Fluker had responsibility for that on 2 separate occasions, and he pivoted a guy 180 degrees both times. And it's one thing to like pivot him and get to maybe about 45 degrees or even 60 degrees on that pivot where you don't quite have the seal done, but it's effective enough. The runner's by and gone. He kept going and pivoted him all the way towards still he's maintaining that block and getting him stuck in the backfield when the runner's somewhat downfield. So those are just beautiful highlight blocks.
Yeah, it makes you kind of question, okay, they played their cards. You now know that Fluker's role is to fill in as a tackle if an injury happens. And, I mean, maybe if a guard went down, they'd bring him in. But you have to wonder, right? Is he the play at guard that takes a team over the top? And are we kind of handicapping ourselves for a scenario that might not happen? I hear you.
It's a really legitimate question, and I think if Phillips were to continue to be unimpressive for several more weeks, and maybe the time you do it is for the Pittsburgh game right after the bye, because that takes him through to week 7, so it's 3 more weeks of that's right, 3 more weeks, or is it only 2 more weeks? No, week 7 is the bye.
Yep.
It's 2. It's 2 more weeks of games. So 7 is the bye, and then 8 is Pittsburgh. So
Right.
if they do that, then it could be only 2 more games that Phillips has to turn this around. So hopefully he gets it done. The Eagles, a very tough out for him in terms of a good grade. He should have better luck, I think, with Cincinnati this week, particularly if Geno Atkins isn't active again. But he did have a very solid set of opponents this week. It didn't work out that well for him, and I am where I am on that. With Fluker, I think we've said what we need to do. Is there anything else about special blocks that I want to point out too? A couple highlight books. Fluker pulled 3 out of 3 times from tackle in this game, which is unusual, but again is an indication that, hey, maybe he's got the mobility that the Ravens need at guard as well.
Yeah, we saw the work he did in the offseason, and I honestly thought that was going to be their play, is him at guard. And I started hearing the rumblings from Jeff Zrebiec suggesting Phillips would be the guy, and that's what happened. So now I think it's clear they're holding him for injuries, but like you said, maybe it's time to bring him in. So I think the bye is a perfect place to do that substitution if they make it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if there's anybody they like out there who, if Holden is not the guy that could get a tackle. I know a lot of teams around the NFL, by the way, have been protecting a tackle. But Greg Senat is being protected by Cleveland currently, so he'd be available and would be a possibility. He's probably a step down from Fluker, I would have to guess, in terms of his ability to play tackle, but not necessarily to play left tackle. So that might really matter if something were to happen additionally. Hopefully, we hold our breath. Everything's right with Stanley this next week, and life is good the rest of the year. But boy, it's not feeling real comfortable right now.
No, we won't feel comfortable, Ken, until this season's over.
That's right. That's true.
It's just honestly, yeah, one bad play and things can fall apart quick.
It's not like anybody really didn't predict that Stanley would miss time. Stanley's missed like a game or two every single year, so it's not unexpected.
Yeah, hopefully just getting it out of the way.
All right. Patrick McCary came in for 7 plays, made 5 of his blocks, 2 of 2 pulls. Some good things to like here. He got shed on 1 play, and that's always something I'm on the lookout for, given his arm length issues. But he's a guy who probably can step in at guard if needed at some point, or maybe even center if that's the case. And hopefully it won't be. Powers came in, made all 4 blocks, including a pancake on a pull. He looked pretty damn good. And I know there are obviously questions about who Powers is, but there's another option at guard there. You have McCary, and he didn't look bad in the time he's had. He's generally been the first man up. Powers, has been active all the games. He's played a little bit, just a handful of snaps, honestly. But we've never seen anything from him in a live game that was truly bad. I mean, he's been only good. I mean, I keep wondering, when are we going to get to see what the coaches already see? Obviously as a player who's just not quite ready to step in at guard. And they have a guy again, Phillips. Maybe what if Fluker isn't the guy at guard? What if they're really the plan is to keep him at tackle and make sure that they have the extra guy? Is it totally unreasonable to think that Powers could be the guy who replaced Phillips if he continues to struggle?
Oh, yeah. I was going to bring it up when we got to him. Yep. Powers, he made that savvy veteran move of pulling Dobbins at the end of the play, try to give him a little extra yardage. And like you said, you've never seen anything particularly bad out of him. It seems like there's some ghost around this guy, but whenever he plays live, he's fine. I don't really know what's going on there. I would love to know the story. That's probably one of the number 1 players on the Ravens that I'm like, what is going on with this guy?
I'm sorry, I had myself muted there for a second. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And he's made all 6 of his blocks this year, and I think he's 25 of 29 in the Pittsburgh finale last year. So he's never had a negative event in 35 plays. Not that that's a sample size of any note, but it's worth talking about at least that hey, maybe this guy deserves a chance at some point.
Yep.
It's not a matter of necessarily of him deserving the chance as much as the Ravens needing to know what the hell they have. If they think there's a chance they could have something here, then they probably ought to be trying to figure it out at the very latest by year 3, and he's in year 2. Bredesen and Phillips, they have some additional time to figure out what they have there.
Yeah, and honestly, I've kind of wondered if there's a place to have more heavy lines. We're traditionally a run
like
team.
a jumbo 6-man line?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have the linemen, it seems. So I'm kind of curious if they've considered those packages.
Well, they have done them maybe 3 or 4 times so far this year with McCary.
Yeah.
They don't use Powers in them, so Powers has to get into the game as a late game replacement or an injury replacement, and so far he's never been the first injury replacement. He's only been a late game replacement. They played all 8 linemen in this game. Ben Bredesen got his first NFL action. He of the short arms was shed to the ground on his first NFL snap, not unlike Dorsey in terms of what happened to him. He made one of two blocks on the game, and then he was in there also. He's got 4 snaps in the game book, you'll notice. That's because he was in there for the kneel-down plays. So anyway, start to his career. There we go.
Yep. Welcome to the NFL.
All right, Lamar Jackson. Let's move on, talk a little bit about him. Exceptional game as a passer, as far as I'm concerned. The only word on it is that interception at the end of the half, which is a bummer. And it's the kind of pass that is not gonna make him more comfortable throwing back shoulder to the outside the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you can kind of half attribute that to Boykin. He didn't seem fully aware in that play. The ball was coming his way. I think he could have done more to break that up if he wasn't going to make the catch. I would honestly say I was a little disappointed in Lamar, and the reason why is the same reason he said he was disappointed, of missing these wide open throws. I mean, they weren't hugely open, but when Hollywood Brown has a step, he's open, right? He missed him twice, and then right back to Boykin the next play on some longer plays. And I definitely want to see a little bit more consistency there. Obviously, it's not breaking the game. We handled it well, so it's not, he didn't lose us the game. But I agree with him that I definitely want to start seeing those connections click a little bit more often. Where the deep ball, except for that first one, the first game for 48 yards to Hollywood Brown, he's missed, I think, 9 of those throws past 25 yards. I think that was the statistic. So I definitely want to start seeing some more of those completions.
Yeah, I heard that during the game that he'd missed a bunch of throws that were over, I thought it was over 20 yards. But one of the next gen stats had his long from 1 week as 26, and I was trying to figure out which game that was. Might have been against the Chiefs, and I couldn't figure out. But longest completed air yards is one of the things they had. Interesting metrics from next gen. But sorry, I mean, to just start it off, he had 8.7 yards per pass net of sacks in this game. That's a terrific number. If he were to do that all the time, Ravens would win the Super Bowl. I mean, his rating was 107 in this game, which is largely a function of the interception more than anything else, but is also a hell of a rating to have. It's right around his career rating, and we would love for that to continue, obviously. I want to go over 3 of the next-gen stats, though, and I think we'll talk about each of these individually. The first is 3.03 seconds as time to throw. I'll tell you how I interpret it first, is that he extended plays very effectively. It wasn't a function of the line giving him a ton of time in the pocket. And if this were Joe Flacco, or if it were an immobile pocket quarterback who is taking that long to throw, you might think maybe it's a lot of pocket time. It generally doesn't happen to those guys. Those guys get rid of the ball pretty quickly, and they check down pretty quickly because they have that internal clock telling them, get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it all the time. In Lamar's case, he's thinking, I can make a play, 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 and he's moving around with his legs to create a throwing lane or to wait for a guy to break open so he can do that. So I'm really excited when he's sitting at 3.03 seconds in terms of time to throw. It was, I think, the second highest in the NFL this week. So exceptional, and he's right around 3 for the entire season, which is terrific. So when you compare that to the 242 Haskins had in time to throw, I think you see a lot of the difference, both in style and in the way that those guys are used by their offensive coordinators.
It's remarkable how a half second means so much. And you're right. It's the difference in players getting open and completing their routes in some cases. So, yeah, it's definitely good to see his ability to extend plays. And we all know that, next to Mahomes, I don't think there's any better improviser in the league. So that's exactly what he needs.
Yeah, league has a few improvisers now, and to be on the top of the list, when this Russell Wilson is out there too, of course. And,
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. So the and Deshaun Watson, even though he doesn't usually he hasn't extended plays in the same way he has this year, in the past, I think he's another guy who has some of that in him. But Jackson is really special, and we want to encourage that. And you were here for years as a Ravens fan when the Steelers would have these extended plays with Roethlisberger, who wasn't even a particularly mobile quarterback, but he was certainly very annoying in terms of his ability to extend plays.
Yeah, you couldn't bring him down. Super frustrating.
All right. We go to a second next-gen stats, which was 10.0 completed air yards. So that's the average distance from the line of scrimmage for his completions. Second in the entire NFL this week to Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins. That's a surprise.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
So this guy.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, pushing it down the field's critical. I think we're arguing that they should do it almost even more, or continue to keep that up. I think that's a number that is not a bad thing in the slightest, and it's something to strive towards. Obviously, completing the pass is critical, but you have to create those opportunities as well.
Right, his intended air yards was 14.2, so he threw the ball even deeper on a lot of the incompletes. You mentioned that he missed on some longer passes, both in this game and for the last couple of games, and that was still there, but you don't have to complete as many when you throw deep. And your screen passes and your swing passes to running backs and your check downs, they're going to be completed at a much higher rate, and they of course drag your average down. If you're looking to throw a lot of screen passes, you change the responsibility for who's getting the first down from the quarterback to the running back or to the wide receiver, perhaps. So, Duvernay and Dobbins are players who give you good chances to get yardage after the pass on screen, but a lot of those are delivered, 4, 5, 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and it starts you at a significant disadvantage to making big plays occur.
Yep.
All right. Two great extended plays I want to talk about in this game. And do you want to talk about one and I'll talk about the other kind of thing? I know
Sure.
you had this on your list. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, you can go ahead with the first one, the Andrews.
Okay, I mean the Andrews TD I love for a lot of reasons. I mean for starters, it was a long extended play where he was flushed out of the pocket to the left by pressure. Okay, now let me just tell you, when a right-handed quarterback gets flushed out of the pocket to the left, my immediate, feeling after watching Joe and other right-handed quarterbacks for the Ravens all these years has been, oh crap, the play's dead. And he rolled left. He got his feet reset. He actually didn't even get his feet reset. He almost kind of just turned slightly, not his body, but his feet to kind of turn into the throw, and hit Andrews on the move still, meaning he was on the move. Andrews was obviously on the move, right by that left pylon. It was just an absolutely gorgeous throw, and one of the best I think of his career so far.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I challenge any listener to take a football, roll left if you're right-handed, and try to throw that ball at all, right? And the amount of yards he put and the zip and the precision. Oh yeah, incredible throw. Yeah.
There really isn't anybody else who can do it. I mean, throwing across your body is easier. You have more ability to derive leverage doing that. When you throw only a third of your body or a quarter of your body, like Pat Mahomes can do, and you get any kind of zip on the ball, that's really amazing. In this case, Lamar had less than his normal throwing stride, obviously, to work with here, and he still got off a beautiful, precisely on target throw to Andrews, and Andrews made the catch, and we were happy.
The rest is history.
There you go. How about the second play? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about the play to Marquise Brown on the naked boot. I think this is critical that they continue to incorporate this into the game plan. What we've been seeing a lot of this year is pass rushes intended to make Lamar have to step up in the pocket, and then he's greeted by a linebacker or two ready to tackle him. And this is the formula, right? If people haven't figured it out yet, that's like the way that you slow down Lamar. You can't let him outside the pocket. Once that happens, it's game over. You're going to lose. He's too quick. He's too improvisational. He keeps his eyes down the field, like we were talking about. That's the way you lose. So you have to contain him in the pocket and make him have to step up and then have people there ready to greet him. This play necessarily doesn't allow for that. He's too fast. Again, when he does that naked boot, he's creating the space, and that's really hard to defend. I think that's a play that is really high leverage for him, and he can really pick apart a defense. So we saw it there, and he was so close to scoring the touchdown.
A 31-yard pass. It was a beauty to be sure, and it was one of these ones that was in the middle of a pack of defenders. In fact, I think I was going back to look and see what the Ravens had. Yeah, they had two guys left in to block. So Ricard was actually a set blocker, which means he stays at the line of scrimmage, and and Boyle chipped before going out, so he's obviously restricted in terms of what pattern he can run. But it's beautiful to be able to find one guy down the field under those circumstances and hit him in the way he did in traffic. I thought Brown was going to get in the end zone on the play, which we haven't seen him really take a lot of risks with his body that would allow that kind of a play to get home. But this was one of them where he went a little extra for it.
I know. I thought he was going to get it too. I had him in one of my daily fantasy sport lineups, and it'd have been nice. I was like, come on, man. Yeah. So.
All right. Let's move on to one negative thing about Jackson is that I'm still seeing him turn the wrong way on pistol play action plays. And I know we want to talk about the pistol a little bit later here, but in terms of that, he may have some sort of a little left-right thing. So what happened here is the running back came up to his right, and he turned left to make the play action fake. And it was going to be play action fake either way, but didn't fake anybody out because the play action fake was on the wrong side. So it's one of these things where it's still important that he gets the left-right part, correct.
Sure.
And it's a shame we see that occasionally.
Yeah, I honestly haven't noticed that too much. I have seen it once or twice, but yeah, obviously it ruins the effect.
It had some it had some last year, but they've got to change now probably the way they teach it. First of all, there may be a mnemonic necessary to get him to remember left or right, but there's also another way to do it, and you can teach people left or right by teaching them what they have in their hand. So if he's always got the football in his right hand, right? So he should be, and that's not true. He might be running with it. He might have it in his left arm. But most of the time when he's coming back from a shotgun, he's got the ball in his right hand. He just has to turn the direction of his right hand and think of it that way instead of, you're getting confused about it. But anyway, he may have some little problem. I don't want to speak ill of Maureen in this way, but occasionally we're out driving or doing around the house, and I say it's on your right, and she starts to reach to her left, and I go, no, your other right. And I do it too. I probably do it 15% of the time, and she probably does it 35% of the time. We notice there's scoring of these things going on. So anyway.
Oh, that's great.
Harbaugh asked that question, by the way, a lot at the podium. I wonder if we came and critiqued you at your house, if you'd be as good. Well, we're doing it. We have the scoring going on here too. So. All right. So what else we got? The interception. Obviously, it's like the first scratch on a new car to me. You can put me down. Let me just say this. He had 7 touchdowns and 1 interception in the first quarter. Put me down for 4 times that. 28 and 4 for the year. I'll take it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. It's a good streak. You won't lose games that way.
No, not too many anyway. It'd be a winning formula. Anyway, let's talk some plays and some scheme, because I know you had some good ideas coming out of this, and I sent you my notes and whatnot, and you had some ideas also. Why don't you bring up the first thing that you're concerned about in terms of the Ravens offense and what you would like to see scheme wise?
Yeah, so we've been talking about it on Ravens Recap, and I've heard you guys talking about it on the show as well with the offensive reviews. What is going on with the pistol this year? This was a bread and butter formation for the Ravens. Honestly, I think it lacks, or it doesn't have many disadvantages. The only thing I can really think of is the QB sneak, and the snap is slightly less safe, so to speak. But you get to have a little bit of extra time. You're able to set up more read option that way. I honestly don't understand why we're not using it more. I think it's critical to the way this offense ticks, and I think it's one of the reasons we're not seeing as effective a run game. You take away the 50-yard run and then one of the chunk plays for either running back, and it's a very poor performance running the ball, all things considered, compared to what we're used to and the talent that we have.
Yeah, I could see people putting it down that way. Lamar had a barbelled game of one big run and another one medium run, and then a lot of short runs or even a loss. But it's. I want to go back to what you said first, because I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So when you're talking about the pistol, and I'm talking about, so obviously we know what that is. It's obviously one back behind Lamar and fullback position usually to the side and also behind or even with Lamar. But what I want to make sure we don't confuse it with is I'm not talking about when he's otherwise under center. If he needs to be under center to run the sneak, no problem. I understand that has to happen. If you need to be under center to run play action once in a while just to fool your opponent, in some way. That's fine too. But if you're going to run most of your plays out of the shotgun, that's what the Ravens do. Then I think you're better off running them out of the pistol if there's any chance that you're going to run the ball or empty. And the one that they're doing is having a running back to the side of Jackson. And so that's the one that I just don't think there are. I don't think it gives you as many options in terms of what you can do. Now Roman, I'm sure, says no, that's wrong. We have more options to pass the ball when we have Lamar keep his eyes straight forward on the field. So maybe something like that I don't completely get. But I like the time that the pistol creates, because I think the mere point you're in the mesh is a slightly delayed time through that sign. I'm not saying it's half a second or anything like that, but all it has to be is maybe 0.1 seconds or maybe 0.15 seconds. But it has to be enough for the double team blocks to get a little bit more action on the guys they're hitting. It has to be a chance for those linebackers to not take that additional step that they need to do to react to play action. For example, and it gives you that bigger division between, hey, it's a run at the last second, or hey, it's play action at the last second. It gives you a little bit more of a frozen edge defender in terms of keeping him there and not rushing the passer or not making a decision to go after either one or the other of Lamar or the running back. So I like it for a lot of reasons, but the main reason is creation of time, not the creation of an opportunity to throw a pass downfield.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it's totally a timing thing. I agree with you. And that's what I'm hoping that they are able to get more of. And obviously we're saying they're getting good time and how he's able to extend the plays, but they could get more, right? Like there's an opportunity for them to bring back this formation and I think use it more than they are.
All right. Oh, I know we talked about two players that we're wondering, is there a bigger role for them in this offense? And the first is Patrick Ricard. Patrick Ricard had more snaps than any of the running backs. It's the second time it's happened this year. I believe it's the second time it's happened all time. But he had, let's see real quickly here. No, not going to be real quickly because I have to reset here. But in any case, he had more snaps than any of the running backs. So they have this obviously by committee running back situation that's very evenly divided. But Ricard is the fullback in every case. Played 25 snaps in this game. Edwards 22, Dobbins 21, and Ingram 14. So he's getting more snaps than any of them. Should they be doing more to incorporate him in the passing game in particular, since his motion often leads to a situation that you want other teams to respect?
Right. I think you're talking about it mainly from a respect perspective and kind of to fill in more for the Hurst role. Is that kind of what you're getting with?
Well, I certainly don't. I don't think he really can be a downfield receiver the way Hurst is. Although I think he might have ran one of those patterns in this game. It was kind of weird. He actually left the line of scrimmage from a tight end position to run a pattern. But I'm really more talking about when he goes in motion. Usually it's from left to right. To he can either make a block or he can go out into the flat and be ready to catch a ball. And he's caught several balls out there that way last year. I'm wondering why they wouldn't try and use him more there, if for no other reason than to show it to opposing defensive coordinators to say, hey, we might do this, and then we got a 300-pound guy on the outside against your 200-pound safeties and corners.
Oh, sure. I mean, we've seen him with the ball in his hand, and it's actually pretty entertaining. I've never seen someone pop up so fast when they kind of fell over to catch the ball to get in the end zone, right? I mean, 300 pounds, he sprung like a spring, It was incredible.
That really was remarkable how quickly he was able to pop up from that and make sure he got in the end zone. But the guy almost never goes down to contact. And the characteristic I love about him is if he gets pushed out of bounds, he wants to maintain his feet. It's almost like it's more important than not getting pushed out of bounds. and then he won't flip the ball to any kind of official. He always has to go over and hand it to him. And it's like he has to stick it in his belly. It's like, nobody else is touching this ball. I'm not risking anybody else touching it, even if I'm, just tossing it up. It's always like, it's weird to see, but I love it. I really enjoy watching him play.
Oh yeah. No, I totally think it would be valid for him to get the ball more. And also, like you said, it just increases the, what is he doing in their perspective. I think they're doing a ton of that with Gus Edwards, by the way. The amount of times he's in on a pass plays is kind of outstanding, considering that he's definitely number 3 when it comes to, best hands and best after the catch capabilities. So they're not shy with doing it with Edwards. And I think honestly, in a way, Ricard has more to offer because it's more surprising.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, we probably hit on Ricard too much here, but I know we want to talk about Duvernay. But what would you like to see them do with Duvernay?
Yeah. Maybe it's not. I know they're very different players in a way, but if you've been watching how the Jaguars have been using Laviska Shenault, and allowing him even to do rush plays and just create, get the ball in his hands and say go. I love that kind of interactions with the player with his skill set. He's blazing fast. He's pretty strong for his stature, and I just want to see him evolve more. I want to give him a shout out because I don't understand. You don't do a special team show for obvious reasons. The guy, when he gunned, was at the 20-yard line when the opposing player caught the ball. He is just making electric plays every time he's on the field. And we saw him just get missed by Lamar in a pass play down the field in this game. I just want to see more opportunities because he's just electric with the ball. And at the end of the day, this is what I was basically asking of Haskins. I was saying, you got playmakers. I thought Antonio Gibson looks like a young Le'Veon Bell. And Terry McLaurin is an excellent receiver. If he can just get the ball out of his hands and let them create, the offense could tick. And actually, Sims, it was kind of unfortunate he was a little banged up. I think he's a player that has an opportunity to spark too on their side. So we see a lot of these young players on the Ravens side, Boykin as well. Like once he gets the ball in his hand, it can be very exciting. And it's just like I want to see him, Lamar, be a point guard and divvy it up. And he's pretty good about that. He does get the ball around. But I just think they need to generate these opportunities to get these guys in a rhythm.
Right. And they are doing some of that. They're clearly doing some scripted plays for Boykin. They could do more for Duvernay to get him in on some scripted plays. But I agree with you about the special teams comment in particular that, his play as a gunner has to be helping him with the team in terms of getting opportunities on offense, given who Harbaugh is. Like he's going to say, "Look, give me one scripted play for Duvernay anyway. I liked what he did on the punt gunning. Wouldn't surprise me at all if that's part of it." Harbaugh does a lot of things, by the way, behind the scene that aren't always apparent, that are like little favors for good practice or whatnot. I remember one time he sat somebody down as a starter, and it's obviously very pointed, but there was another cornerback who came in, and we're not talking Brandon Carr, another cornerback who came in for one play to start the game. And he kept somebody from getting a game started. And it had to be for bad practice habits, being late, something like that. You know it, and he won't talk about it to the general public. But there's no other reason. There's no other explanation for it.
Yeah.
All right. So we all want more for Duvernay. We're not just we're not exactly sure how. One thing we haven't seen from Duvernay is for him to run a really deep route down the field and try and be a 9-route guy or a third or fourth vertical on a play.
Right. Yeah, we haven't seen that yet, and I think it's totally something he can do. We know his hands are pretty excellent, and yeah, just get the ball. Let's see what can happen. It's exciting.
The point's been made for Lamar that you can run a 5 vertical route if you want, because you don't need a check down guy, which most 4 vert routes have a check down guy. And the most famous 4 vert route in Ravens history is the Mile High Miracle. Was 4 vertical routes, and Jacoby Jones was the guy on the outside, and he didn't even have to know who it was. And Flacco may have known or may have not known, but he knew what he said after it in describing the plays, that he knew he had an outside receiver that was going to be there, so he just kind of had to put the ball up under those circumstances. He was under duress, so he might not have known that it was Jacoby Jones at the time. But anyway, with the Ravens, you can actually run 5 verticals now, which usually means, because of the spacing on the field, you don't actually want to run 5 guys deep, but you run 4 deep and you run 1 deep crosser. So they're all deep routes, but Lamar is his own check down in terms of leaving the pocket if that needs to be the case. And with the time to throw he's been able to generate this year, I want to see more of that. I want to see more, generated vertical opportunities, not by just single one-on-ones, but by, hey, let's throw a bunch at them and see if their cover 3 can deal with this. The other team's going to play a lot of cover 3 at certain times. So, they'll play generally a lot of zone defense, period, against Lamar. So why not test it occasionally with a 4-vert play or even a 5-vert play that's going to really put some stress on that?
You're just making me excited to watch the Cincinnati game. Hopefully someone's listening. That'd be fun.
All right. Skill position players. We usually alternate here. Why don't you go ahead and pick one, and we'll go down whatever ones you want to talk to for 3 or 4 exchanges here.
Sure. Yeah. So let's talk about Andrews. He had 2 kind of down games after a huge week 1, and questions with his hands. Just it wasn't a target problem; it was a hands problem, particularly against the Chiefs. It was good to see that he got involved. He was effective and made plays. We know he can do it. We've talked. I've heard you talk on the show as well about his drop problem. It's a thing. It's a known bug. And I think we need to. Again, it's hard. I'm basically asking for this from a lot of the players, but it's getting them their confidence up and getting a strong first start with them. I think it's a huge bonus because the Ravens need to start strong and fast in order to play their best ball. Like you talked about, when they're ahead, they don't lose, which is obvious. That's a good way to start. But I think it's really important to get that rhythm going right away.
It definitely helps the Ravens in terms of who they are DNA wise to be able to pound the rock down the other team's throat, and also to play big turnover defense in the second half of games when they lead and lean more heavily on their dime as opposed to other packages, which typically leaning on the dime when you're ahead is usually a pretty damn good thing. They didn't make it work against the Chiefs, but otherwise they've been very effective. Going back to Andrews though for a second, he's got a 60% catch rate this year. That's after going 3 for 3 in this game. He actually went through how many game period would it be? 14 plus 3, 17 game period where his catch rate was only 58%. And that is scarily low for a tight end. It's just not acceptable. So that through week 2 of last year, had caught 16 of 17 balls. And then all of a sudden he has a 58% catch rate for a 17 game period.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real problem for a tight end. Wet or not. And there was a lot of wet games last year. It was a horrible year for wet weather, but still not acceptable. All right, I'll bring up a player. Miles Boykin is a guy I've been calling for more targets. There's a couple ways you can get him targets. You can obviously script targets for him directly, where they're on the sheet at the start of the game, and you talk to Lamar at halftime. You say, okay, I want to open up the third quarter with a scripted play to Boykin. You can throw back shoulders to him. You can be part of the regular trust mechanic of I look for Boykin here when I'm in trouble in this situation kind of thing. But one of his targets came from the punter in this game. Doesn't really count. He was 1 of 3 otherwise catching the ball, and he needs something else where Roman develops the trust with Lamar that the play is going to work regularly, and that when he looks to it as the first read, it's an easy read, and he says, I've seen him catch it so many times, I'm going to put it here. I have the confidence he's going to go get it.
Right. It's hard. The Ravens are a more run-heavy team than most, and there's not that many opportunities to go around.
Good point.
I understand. This is a really difficult problem for Roman to solve, and I mean that's why he's one of the best offensive coordinators in the league. He has a lot of targets that, if they get involved and they get hot, are scary. It's just a matter of how do you incorporate all of them. Yeah.
Ravens have so much invested in Miles Boykin at this point in terms of him playing well, and I want to remind people we're not very far removed from the wide receiver free agent treadmill years, when the Ravens would spend a lot of cap dollars every year going out and finding these retread loser, Crabtree, Macklin guys who would come in, and Wallace, even I really put in the same category, even though he's a little better, guys who weren't very good to come in and play for big dollars and who their future we didn't know. It's a lot of draft capital invested here, finding out what they have in Duvernay, in Prochet, in Boykin, making sure that Brown is the player he can be. Is all very important. It's great to get some production out of Willie Snead, but those guys are really the future of the Ravens, and they need to make sure that they know what they have with those players, so they can reduce the amount of draft capital they spend on the position and the amount of cap dollars they spend there.
Yeah, and let's go straight to Snead. I think he's been an underappreciated weapon in this offense. As you have in your notes, he's had 10 targets this season. I believe 1 or 2 touchdowns, and he's have a 70% catch rate.
100%.
Which, 100%. I'm sorry. He never had a 70% with Breeze.
Yep.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I mean, he's been money. Okay, yeah, 100%, totally. I actually thought maybe he didn't have perfect, but like relatively good. That's incredible. And again, it's unfortunate for him, right? As we've been talking about, we want to see these draft picks prosper. They are the future of the franchise. Then you have this veteran who's actually not even that old, all things considered, and he's just producing quietly, doing his job, and I think it deserves recognition here.
Yeah, good point. I mean, he'll be 28 in 10 days. That really is not that old compared to a lot of the free agent receivers the Ravens have had. And they made he was a guy they got when he was a restricted free agent with the Saints. So the Saints didn't tender him. Yeah, they put a low tender on him, which meant that he was going to be paid something less. And the Ravens then offered him, I think, 3 years for $10 million or something, and the Saints didn't match it. So they got him more early than they normally would another player, and he looked good. He was a heck of a receiver for New Orleans if you look back.
Yeah.
In terms of what he did there with over 100 targets his first 2 real years in the league.
Yeah, no, he's actually had a silently productive year or career so far.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else we need? I think I'm okay with what we've talked about here. I'm not sure that there's anybody else we need to really hit on. Anybody else you'd like to talk about?
Well, it's just an overall topic. I'm a huge believer in the ability of Dobbins. Peter on our show compared him to the stud minor leaguer who like is trying to find his way into the rotation. You have a good starter in Ingram and a great closer with Edwards, and it's just trying to find the way to get the ball in his hands. He's electric with the opportunities he's had. A couple of the run designs this week weren't great for him. I felt they were positions no one would succeed in, and he was no better. But particularly when he has just a little bit of space, he is extremely dangerous. And I want to see more out of a guy that got such high draft capital and was such a surprise pick for the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but I'm looking at it, and one of the questions was, do we really have roles for these guys, the 3 of them? And it does seem to me like there is kind of a role that's more developing. And I can describe kind of what each one does. And in the case of Edwards, he's the closer, and they talk about him publicly as being the guy they want coming in and getting tough yards. That is a hell of a job, by the way, to have to come in and be the guy who runs when everybody else knows you're going to run. Mm-hmm. That's a really difficult job. I think we'll agree on that.
Yeah. Oh, and he's doing a really good job.
and doing it really well. And he also is the short yardage back, which means those plays are also going to be lower than average run things. So when he posts these great gaudy yard per carry numbers, it's really special. People should really realize just how special that is, that he can, put up 5 yards a carry. And I don't know where he is exactly this year when he's asked to do it under such adverse circumstances where everybody's expecting them to run. They're packing the box. They're using 3 defensive linemen, on those plays typically. His chances are just not as good. But anyway, I love what he's done. I think everybody does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ingram's just so reliable. I mean, the way that he's been able to produce this year, I was a little concerned with the injury at the end of the year that something might, they might have known something. That's one of the reasons they went for Dobbins so early. But no, he looks like himself, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, he's been fine. I mean, he's a good receiver, and he's a guy that they like to use at the beginning of games. He's a guy you can use on first and second down and not really give away whether you're running or passing. Dobbins is that guy too, by the way, but they're not willing to give all those snaps away from Dobbins to Ingram from Ingram to Dobbins at this point. What I think distinguishes Dobbins is that not only can he run and he can obviously do some of those. You know what I want to make the point about Ingram though? He's the master of the mesh point. at this point. He's really the guy who's mastered it to the greatest degree. And he deserves credit for that. Lamar's great season last year, and his as well, was largely due to the fact that he's very patient in moving through that mesh point and creating that time and space for everybody on the field, for the Ravens to challenge more areas on that field as that happens.
Absolutely.
Good. Going back to Dobbins, the place where he's distinguished himself with the Ravens, and it's been in relatively few snaps this year, has been as a pass blocker. So they've had him in on third down a lot, and I know why they want to have him in on third down primarily because he's a good receiver. But they've also had him on third down, and he's really distinguished himself from the others as a pass blocker. I don't think Edwards has been terrible or anything, but Edwards is not a very polished pass blocker. Dobbins has some unbelievable undercut ability in him that we've seen a couple of times in the last 2 games, where he could flip a blitzing linebacker or safety completely over, and it's fun to watch.
And I've loved that little snippet they posted on social media of him waving Lamar goodbye on the 50-yard run. I didn't notice that live. That was great.
I missed it live too. That is fantastic. It's you just kind of catch it on that end camera. They use that camera a lot more in the games, it seems, right now. And frankly, as an analyst, I'm really annoyed by the camera angles being quarterback centric this year, because I want to score the formation. I want to, the first thing we write down when we score offensive line play is, okay, that was 3-1-1, which means 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. And we I have to be able to see where they're lined up to make that judgment. I'm not, it's not the position of the player that I'm using. So anyway, when we go back to that, I'm bothered by that. But that back camera angle gives you some incredible stuff you just don't see. And during the play, you probably really appreciate having it there.
Yeah.
All right. How about we talk MVPs for this game? And do you have a separate list, or do you want to just talk through my list, or what would you like to do?
Yeah, we can just go right ahead. I would give my first one to Gus Edwards. Like you said,
that's your number 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'll give it to Gus Edwards. I mean, like you said, he has a hard job, and he's doing it incredibly well. And as much as I'm like a little upset, maybe he's a carry vulture for Dobbins. At the end of the day, I mean, he's producing. He's doing a great job. He deserves it.
Do you have Dobbins in a fantasy league or something?
I have him in a lot of fantasy leagues, but it's honestly not even why. I think he's an exciting player.
Sure, it isn't.
No, I do actually have him in a lot of places, and but it's more so like when he gets the ball in his hand, it could be anything, and I think that's what's exciting about him. And I just like also he seems like a gamer. He's just very competitive. He's one of the first guys out there during warmups, and I'm just excited for his career.
Yep. Me too. Okay, my number 3 guy is Andrews. Good game of reconnecting. It wasn't a lot of catches, 3 catches, but they were big, and they were really a big part of this game, and certainly in terms of the 2 touchdowns.
Yep. For me, it was Lamar. Had a great game, all things considered, and it was exciting to see him spring a long run. I noted it right away. I was like, oh, that's the longest of his career, because it's been a lot of conversation how he hasn't had one. Like relatively, and he won it this year, and I was glad to see it.
Yeah, it's one thing you hear other coaches talk about he could have a 70-yard run if he does that. Well, Lamar doesn't really have that kind of speed. I don't think he has the great long speed to run away from the defensive backs in this league with the kind of ease people assume he can do. We might even saw some of it on this play. I mean, it was a very well-blocked play, and he still had trouble getting into the end zone. Celebrated a little bit early, maybe, but anyway, he's got plenty enough speed, but his big asset, I just want to keep reminding people, is reading opponent leverage, and he seems to always kind of be going in third gear because his biggest concern is, how do I make the next guy miss? And it's great to see a runner like that. My number 2 guy is Orlando Brown, stepping in at a position, even though his grade wasn't terrific in this game, you just got to see it was a incredibly important C for this Ravens offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to counter that, I'm going to go with Fluker. I understand that he had a very bad grade when you consider the holds, but I'm going to just discount those. I think the way that he was able to play when it really mattered was pretty exceptional, and just given the circumstances.
I certainly understand that too. I could have had Brown, Fluker, as I often cheat with by naming 2 guys anyway. Jackson's my number 1.
Yeah.
As a runner and a passer, obviously a huge game, and I don't think we need to really say anything more about that.
Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson. There you go. Josh, what do we got in the mailbag?
All right, let's get to the mailbags. A little bit in there. Again, you can steer the show using the hashtag FilmStudyMailbag over on Twitter. First one up, we got Mike, who says, I watched the All 22 on Game Pass this morning, and what is your opinion on Greg Roman's pass play design?
Okay. About the only thing I'd say about it is what some of the things we said earlier about the 4 verticals, which basically comes down to this point. I would like them to threaten more of the field on a more consistent basis. So basically, show your willingness to go anywhere on the field with the football with Lamar, and basically force them to defend it as best they can. And then by showing it, you also got to be willing to do it when that's where the opportunity is. You know, and it's certainly what Patrick Mahomes is really good at is finding that weakest spot on the field. And I'd like for, this is not a Roman thing, but maybe to create additional trust with receivers, he can have some scripted plays that support that as well, whether that's slants to Boykin or some type of sluggo route maybe to Boykin that creates a deep opportunity for him.
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well. Those would be the overall things that I would like to see more of. And overall, I also would be a little bit more interested in screenplays. I think they have the personnel to do them effectively, and it's just a matter of incorporating them.
Yeah, we saw how well Washington did with their screenplays, and it was a matter of, getting tight ends on the outside and getting their bigger receivers. The Ravens do have those guys. So, you get Duvernay out there on the same side where you have, say, Boykin and Boyle, or Boykin and Andrews. I mean, those guys are going to be fine in terms of way outsizing whoever they have to block on the edge of a formation like that and creating a big opportunity for a player like Duvernay. So I'd love to see it too.
All right, next up, have the Ravens decreased the number of fits they create on offense this year?
I'm sorry, so what was the word?
Fits.
F-I-T-S?
F-I-T-S.
Okay. I don't know the answer to that. Now, the guy who's a real expert in offensive formations and what they run off of in terms of whether it's counter or how they're exactly moving linemen around, the concept is this, that your linemen are always playing their same assignments, but your skill position players are the icing on the cake that go with that. And that's the way that Coach explains it, Coach Evans. And basically that you can do a lot of things that are the same with linemen, where you do different things with your skill position players. I don't really know the answer to that. It seems like since they're doing more running from this back next to them, it could well be that there are more starting formational fits. But I honestly can't tell you, even though it's core offensive line play, that they're doing more or less of total offensive line design concepts.
I would like to comment on this because I think it kind of goes into one of the conversations we had in the production meeting that didn't really come up in the show. And that's the concept that I think after a quarter of the season has now been played, the Ravens' identity this year on offense is not as clear as it was. And I think that's what they mean maybe by fits. Because even when you knew exactly what they were going to do to you, last year the Ravens just did it anyways, right? I think this year, even the Ravens aren't 100% sure what they're going to do to succeed against you. They've been really kind of all over the place as far as the calls and the approaches they take drive after drive. We've been seeing success. They have a lot of skill, but I think it's not as much of an identity this year. And I think that's just because of the amount of characters they're trying to get involved. That's just my take on it.
So you're saying that the number of players that are trying to get involved in the offense is actually holding back the offense from defining an identity for themselves.
Somewhat, I know, and it kind of is counterintuitive to what we've been saying. We want these guys to have more opportunity. That's why I've been saying Greg Roman has a really hard job on his hands because there's all these players that we want to find their kind of roles, their niches that are kind of ambiguous right now. And we see potential for this, potential for that, but we're not sure. But it's hard given the snap counts, and it's hard as far as game flow, and it's hard as far as rhythm to do all these things. So it's a really difficult balance.
I understand that, and I think one of the things I heard from Roman during the offseason, which seems to be true in terms of how he rotates the skill position players, is that he wanted to have a lot of different personnel packages that he would use, and he would be able to rotate them by down. The Ravens aren't a no-huddle team. I know, by the way, they're not ineffective when they have to run a hurry-up offense and go to the line of scrimmage and make a play, make a play, make a play, make a play.
Mhm.
They've been great in the last 2 minutes and having real fast
Really
scoring
good.
drives.
Yeah.
But they haven't tried to make that the identity of the offense. And they could, but they haven't tried to. What they've tried instead to do is multiple personnel groups to wear the opponent down, which is the other main way. If you can run a fast no huddle, you can get the pass rush very tired, and that could create great opportunity for Lamar, but you got to stay with your same 11. If you go the other way and you could do multiple personnel groups, then you're trying to get the more of the secondary and linebackers tired out with the fresh legs you're running in against them. So they're doing more of that. Obviously, the pass rush can get tired then too, but you have two options in the way to do it. The Ravens have chosen this personnel group way, which is really the way the Saints ran it for a number of years during the last decade. So I'm not saying it's a losing proposition by any stretch, but maybe it is something they can change even within a game and try it a different way, or certainly within a season.
All right. Now, final question. You got to switch a little over to the other side of the ball, because you know that the problem with sports fans is when a player that you like leaves and goes with another team, you always think maybe he can come back. So the Cowboys have released Brendan Carr today. Does he fit into this team?
There are ways in which he does, and I'll be quick about this, but he definitely fits in from a standpoint of he's a versatile guy who can play all the positions that they could be short at right now. He can play outside corner, he can play slot corner, and he can play safety. The question is he really a good cornerback anymore, to the point where they want to entrust the defense to what he does? And I think there are elements of what he does as a cornerback that would still be good, namely, could he press guys off the slot and do the other physical things that are close to the line of scrimmage off the slot, play shallow crosses well, really play his zone responsibilities tightly, as we have not seen out of Patrick Queen, for example? I think from that perspective, he'd be a good pickup. I think if the ideal guy they want to pick up is just to pick up a starting slot corner. And so the idea of trading for Logan Ryan makes a lot of sense to me in terms of how he could fit with the Ravens. He's only on a 1-year deal now with the Giants.
Are you not concerned about spending cap dollars on a guy because it's probably going to be the veteran minimum on this year?
He's, I would love to spend the vet minimum, so that's great on Carr, but Logan Ryan actually had most of his salary paid as a bonus, so it's really the draft capital you would spend, and I still don't think it's much. I think that if you're the Giants, you're trying to get rid of him. I think you might have $2.5 million to be paid during the entire season, might be $3 million, but then a quarter of that's already gone, so it's like two vet minimum players that you'd be bringing on and expending towards your total cap expenditures.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was talking about Carr, but that makes sense too. That's good to know.
All right. Well, Alec, tell people how they can follow you on Twitter, and tell us a little bit about Ravens Recap.
Sure. Ravens Recap is a show that I do with two really long friends that I've watched the Ravens with for a lot of my life. Peter in particular, I've known him since I was 5. We've been great friends our whole lives. And then I actually met Chris in college, and he knew Peter from high school, and it was kind of funny how that worked out. And we decided to start a show together. And we like to talk about kind of give our takes on some of the fan perspectives we hear a lot of, right? Like, everyone losing their minds about the Chiefs game. We kind of wanted to bring that back down to life, and also just kind of provide that water cooler talk that you might miss if you're an international fan or something of that nature. So we try to bring that quality, that Baltimore spirit to podcast. You can find that ravensrecap.com. And I tweet about the Ravens and give some additional opinions on Twitter, Ravens_recap.
Yeah, by all means, tag when you can. Anyway, when you think of it, make sure you tag Alec at Ravens Recap, because it really opens you to another group of fans who are gonna comment on things. And I always encourage people, when we have guests on this show, tag people, just get them involved in the conversation. And maybe you develop a new friend on Twitter. That's what Twitter is. It's not about that count of followers, because that count of followers has a lot of empty people who will never respond to you in any way. It's about how many really quality connections you can make with people who want to bounce things back and forth with you, out ideas, guys who want to challenge you in terms of your thoughts anyway. And Alec's great for that, so I'd highly recommend not only following him, but tagging him when you have conversations like that.
Thanks, Ken.
All right, and over on filmstudybaltimore.com, you'll find the defensive podcast with Gabe that came out yesterday. You'll find the defensive article. We've got the offensive article coming out tomorrow. We've got the Situation Room podcast up there if you haven't checked that out. Lots of great content over at filmstudybaltimore.com.
Guys, you got to check out the Situation Room podcast. I listened to it on the way into work today. Fantastic. Really great stuff.
Yeah, they're great guys. We just had them on the defensive show each the last 2 weeks, and they're both very good. They both live out in L.A., but they're big Ravens fans, and both very analytic, and it's a good pod.
Oh yeah, 100% sign off on that too.
All right, Ken, coming this week, we've got Know Your Foe and By the Numbers. How are they looking?
Know Your Foe we'll record tomorrow with a great X's and O's guy, another coach who we is a big fan of the Cincinnati Bengals. He's going to tell us all about them. So I'm really looking forward to that, more than I've looked forward to a Know Your Foe episode in a while. And I shouldn't say that because now our last people have been on the show. But anyway, this is another really good one. Let's put it that way. We've had all good guests this year.
Right.
And then By the Numbers, we'll record either tomorrow or on Thursday with Dan Reese, and that's always a lot of fun. It's a very quick 10 or 12 minute quick podcast that gives you 10 numbers that we think currently that reflect the state of the Ravens in some way.
All right, that's exciting. Stuff to look forward to as we finish out the week. Guys, we will talk again soon. Enjoy your day.